And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Flying weather graphic for Thursday morning showing a band of IFR with that system coming southeastward or east-southeastward here in the Bering Sea. So IFR, Pribilof Islands down to the eastern Aleutians, becoming marginal for the central Aleutians, and VFR out to the west. VFR here along the western interior, actually through the Tanana Valley there, all the way into Canada. Marginal VFR slipping up across the northern Kenai Peninsula, northern Cook Inlet, Madawaska-Susitna Valley, and southern Copper River Basin, with IFR along and just south of the North Gulf Coast, marginal VFR for the southeast coast. And then for Thursday afternoon, marginal VFR, Brooks Range out to the Arctic coast, marginal VFR here along and southeast of the Alaska Range. You can see cutting across northern Cook Inlet, specifically the Madawaska Valley, on down into the North Gulf Coast. Now some IFR here over the southeast coast. And Kodiak Island, mostly marginal. Pretty good VFR here. Dillingham and around Togiak northward, right on up across the Kuskokwim Valley, just about all the Yukon River here, right down to the southwest coast. And now we've got the IFR area pushing into Nunivak Island, still southward here, Alaska Peninsula to about Unalaska. And then we'll see for the morning hours with that storm system sliding southeastward here, and then moisture coming northward as that happens. We've got good IFR across Kodiak Island pushing up to the southern Kenai Peninsula and probably at least to the entrance of Resurrection Bay. And then IFR here just west of Cape Nuanem and just near or south of the Pribilofs, extending down toward Atka, with VFR in the interior here and North Slope and Arctic coast, marginal VFR. And then we'll see for the afternoon hours, that area coming southward here with the storm dropping southward. And then southeast flow here keeps IFR in over Kodiak Island, pushing quite an area of IFR up across the Gulf of Alaska into the southern Kenai Peninsula. And northern Cook Inlet, Susitna Valley, Madawaska Valley, all of the interior looking pretty good, VFR there. And no change for the North Slope and Arctic coast, just some IFR here now along the north shore of the Alaska Peninsula. Marginal for the Aleutians, at least to about Amchitka Island, and VFR there for the southeast coast. Passes, Anaktuvuk and Adigan, marginal VFR again tomorrow, and for the western Alaska Range, VFR turning toward marginal VFR in the afternoon. Some moisture slips in from the east-southeast. And that same forecast for rainy, probably the better conditions earlier in the day and a little bit lower in the afternoon toward evening. Same trend for windy as well. And for Isabel, VFR optimistically, and Mentasta will be VFR tomorrow. Tanita occasionally marginal. And for Portage, IFR, Chilkoot and White, marginal VFR, turning toward IFR throughout the day. And for the freezing levels here, 2,000 feet, North Gulf Coast and across the northern Panhandle, and then kind of meandering down across the Alaska Peninsula here, then back up toward the Pribilofs and the Bering Sea, and 4,000 feet now down south of the central Aleutians, coming back up toward the east side there. And for icing, with all this moisture coming southeastward with that storm, we've got an area of considerable moderate rime icing for the Alaska Peninsula here, and possible isolated moderate for the western Arctic coast as well as the east side there in a shallower layer. And for the southeast coast, some areas of considerable moderate rime icing. And from there, looking at the jet stream, 90 knots out of the southwest, cutting across the southern Panhandle, otherwise light over the interior. The main jet here getting pushed southward here as this low tracks southeastward. And so the strongest jet core will be south of the Aleutians. And at 9,000 feet, here's that strong low here developing, strengthening low, moving southeastward to about this position. As you can see, 40 to 50 knot winds blowing around that center, much lighter in the interior, this very weak disturbance in the west central interior there along the Yukon River, and maybe 35 knots out of the southwest across the Panhandle. coming down to 3,000 feet. No winds of any significance here for the southeast coast, Gulf of Alaska, or the interior. All the wind is out to the west at this elevation, associated with this low here. And again, winds blowing 50 to 60 knots around that center there, and starting to increase here along the southwest coast a little bit. And Kodiak Island, strongest wind staying off to your west. Then up here to the north, we've got northeasterlies 25, picking up to 35 knots there through the Bering Strait and St. Lawrence Island. And from there, looking at turbulence, kind of a widespread area of moderate turbulence here from the central Bering Sea on down here, covering much of the western central Aleutians. Light to isolated moderate for the Fox Islands, back into considerable moderate for the Alaska Peninsula, and none of any significance for the interior, Panhandle, or the Gulf of Alaska.